So it's been over a year since my original Fall of the Trident campaign on Titan, and 10 months since my Ludicrous run started, but I wanted to revisit the campaign now that the game has had chance to mature, and see what has changed following all the patches, balances, and nerfs. I've also seen many comments that suggest that some of my original strats no longer work due to game changes, balance patches, and even some unexpected bugs, which seems to have made what was already a challenging game even harder. So here I am, back again with my post-patch summary of Age of Mythology Retold's campaign, The Fall of the Trident on Ludicrous. Let's jump into the first mission, Omens. Now whilst this is a tutorial mission, there are a few things we can do straight out of the gate to optimise our success of this mission. First things first, we want to pull 3 villagers from food to wood and 2 villagers from food to gold. Since we are going to be making only toxitates in this mission, we don't have a requirement for more food, and the food we start with will be going into upgrades later on in the mission. Next, we want to group our units together and wait for the first pirate ship to arrive. Once here, we want to time our Countess's overpowered damage buff when the ship is in range of our toxitates, and then proceed to sink it to Davy Jones' locker. Next up, we want to reuse our previous strat to snipe off enemy ships, focusing on the ones with flags at the rear of the boats, preferably before the troops land on our shores. The boats without flags, including the Krakens, can then be picked off at our leisure. The enemy attack waves will land pretty much every minute to a minute and a half, so we want to make sure we're in position to deal with them. At around about the 5-minute mark, upgrades become available, so we want to be grabbing them as soon as we possibly can, including the medium toxitates if we haven't already. If an enemy ship does manage to sneak past your army and land some troops on your shores, then not to worry. We should have a significant number of toxitates, including our Kantos and his anti-myth unit damage buff, to deal with any troops foolish enough to land on our shores. Whilst the enemy attack waves do get larger and more powerful as time goes on, with a good number of toxitates you should have no problem in dispatching their ships and any troops that manage to land. After only 8 short minutes in this mission, it is time for the final battle. This is a rather large attack wave, so it will be almost impossible to pick off all the enemy ships before their troops land. My best advice is to pick a spot and stand your ground, as we'll be getting a large number of reinforcements from the Atlantean army anyway. If you have any god powers left over, now would be a good time to use them, and once the Atlantean army arrives, use them to clear out any enemy troops, and pop the Lightning Storm god power when you get the chance. It's honestly one of the most powerful god powers in the game. That will pretty much conclude the first mission, Omens. As I said, it is a tutorial mission, so nothing too crazy and pretty straightforward, but it is a good tutorial mission nonetheless. Mission 1 ends with our Kantos having defended Atlantis, and the pirates retreating, but not before they nab the Spear of Poseidon. On to Mission 2, Consequences next, with our Kantos hot on the heels of Kamos, the pirate Minotaur who stole the Spear of Poseidon. They make landfall with the goal of destroying Kamos' town centre on the island. At this point in the campaign, the devs are still easing us into the game with another pretty straightforward mission. Although as a time saver, I am going to showcase a cheeky to smash this mission in 8 minutes flat. To start off, we want to build a dock, temple and 5 fishy boats, which will power up our food eco for this mission. We then want to auto queue our workers to the nearby bushes and send our starting transport ship off to the top left of this island, where we will encounter a shipwreck, which will give us plus 300 wood and plus 200 gold for the coffers. Whilst the gold isn't that helpful for this particular strat, the wood most certainly is, as it enables us to build an additional 2 temples, which we will be using to pump out Cyclopses in due course. We do also want to be sending some of our workers to our temples to build up our favour reserves, which we will be needing along with food to build our one-eyed club squad. Fun fact for this mission, when we hit the 400 food quota to age up, we are gifted with an additional 600 food, which we will be putting to very good use. And is also partly why we want 3 temples. We'll be aging up with Ares and then building up to 8 Elder Cyclops. Once amassed, we can send them and whatever else we have built over to Kamos' TC and go to Clubland. Once the town centre has been destroyed, Chemos stands his ground and... Wait, no he doesn't. He runs away like a witch. And victory is ours. Mission 3, Scratching the Surface, is next, which starts the Siege of Troy story arc. After defeating the enemy troops on the beach, we want to build our town centre, dock and a temple. For optimal placement, we want to build the dock to the right of the shipwreck. Once built, we want to build 3 fishy boats and instantly age up with Ares, mostly for his pestilent god power, although for this mission it doesn't really matter which god power we pick. Once we have aged up, we want to auto queue villagers onto wood and gold, with gold being the initial priority. We also want to send 1 worker just north of our initial start location to build a dock and another 3 fishy boats, which will make up the entirety of our food eco for this mission. This will also be the staging site for our first strike on the enemy dock just north of this position. Over the next 3 minutes we'll want to add in a second dock and 3 juggernauts before assaulting the enemy dock. I personally found it beneficial to assault the northeastern dock first, as there is only 1 ship to defend and no towers in range, so it is essentially a free kill. Whilst we destroy the dock, continue to make triremes and juggernauts, then transition to the other dock and use the pestilent god power once our ships are about to be in range of the enemy towers. This will prevent us from taking any unnecessary damage and has the added benefit of preventing the enemy from creating any new ships, at least for the next minute. A minor benefit granted, but a benefit nonetheless. From here we simply focus our efforts on destroying enemy ships and the enemy dock, and just like that, victory is ours at the 10-minute mark. This does however mark the end of our easy ride, as the next few missions are far more involved, and the difficulty curve spikes to a whole new level. Mission 4, Refined Plan, is next, and this is where the campaign really begins. The last 3 missions were just a warm-up, and now the devs are having some fun. Before we get into the strategy of this mission, I found the interaction between Agamemnon, Odysseus and Arkantos particularly good, as essentially Agamemnon tells Arkantos and Odysseus to do all the hard work, whilst he turns up after and takes all the credit and glory of rescuing Helen. What a vulture. Anyway, back to the mission at hand. We want to start this mission by sending Odysseus south of our temple to pick up the relic there. This relic is super useful in this mission, as it provides a plus 30% improved gather rate for fishing boats, and there are a good number of fish next to our starting docks, so this will give us all the food we need in the early game. We also want to build a few additional fishy boats to capitalise on this relic and send our starting troops to raid and destroy some of the enemy gold mines, granting us an influx of gold to build our walls and build our ships. What I didn't realise is just how quickly the enemy ships attack us, which did catch me off guard. Meanwhile, our starting troops will be used to defend ourselves against the enemy attacks by land, although the early walls work wonders here by slowing down their attacks and buying us time to reposition our troops. During this time we are building up our economy, with wood and gold being our core focus. What we should also be doing here, which I didn't do, is build additional ships to protect our docks and fishing boats. If you skimp on building boats, this kind of thing happens. And yes, they caught me off guard a second time. I really did pay the iron price for not building enough ships in the early game. Still, if the enemy does catch you off guard, try to garrison your fishing boats at the docks and keep building ships. Eventually you will break the blockade and get your food eco back online. It is around this time that we are going to want to start adding in farms as a far more sustainable source of food for the mid to late game. Sadly, fish can only get you so far, and our civilization demands wheat and bread. Between now and the 12-minute mark, we are going to want to age up with Dionysus, whilst adding in a few extra Hippias cavalry units so that we can take control of the enemy settlement in the south. This will give us the added benefit of cutting the enemy off from their market eco in the south, which slows down the rate at which they build units and slows down their attacks. We do still, however, need to build more ships during this time, and once we have aged up, we're going to want to focus on adding Scylla and Hydra to our ranks. We also get the added benefit of a free siege tower and a handful of troops where we can launch a dual strike against Purple by land and sea, pretty much removing the remaining threat on the map in one swift strike. At this point in the mission, resources such as gold may well be drying up anyway, so our efforts should be focused on securing more gold mines and building up a new settlement in the northeast to increase our population cap. Since gold is getting scarce at this point in the game, I started up my market eco whilst continuing to build up my army to max before launching our assault on Red's base in the north. Despite some heavy resistance initially, the enemy troops soon dried up, and I discovered an interesting bug or issue with this mission. All of their troops seemed to be stuck behind their gate, which does explain why the enemy attacks were lighter than I had expected. Clearly one of the patches had inadvertently caused their troop movements to be bugged, which reminded me of a similar issue in one of the later Atlantean missions, Greetings from Greece, which was bugged in the exact same way. A shame honestly that this issue had not been addressed, and was the first issue I'd come across so early on in the campaign. Anyway, without the reinforcements from Red, closing out this mission was really quite straightforward. However, the next mission would not be so easy. Moving on to the second most challenging mission in the Greek campaign next, with Mission 5, Just Enough Rope. Now this mission was brutal when the game originally came out, and with all the patches and balance changes, this mission has become even more challenging. The start is straightforward enough. Kill the enemy troops surrounding Ajax and his squad, and send one cavalry unit off to secure his settlement ASAP Rocky. At around the 5-minute mark, the first enemy wave will be coming for us, so we'll need to prepare for its inevitable arrival, and there is a lot of prep to do. First off, we want to send all the pigs to the TC for the villagers to farm for food. Looks like meat's back on the menu, boys. Next up, we want to send Odysseus and one worker to the far left of the map to claim the relic and build a new market, whilst also deleting the old one. More distance equals more gold, and we're going to need every last penny we can get our mitts on to survive the relentless pressure of this mission. Whilst this is happening, we want to send our starting army to the north to disrupt the enemy's food production. First with the farm outside our base, and then through their back door to kill as many villagers as we can before their army shows up. Destroying the granary used to work wonders, but the AI learnt how to rebuild structures, the crafty buggers. I actually don't know what impact this actually has on the game, but it does feel good to do. It's basically free and forces the enemy to spend time and resources in rebuilding villages. Kinda sounds like a win to me, even if it does just make me feel better. Whilst retreating, it may even be possible to pick off a few stragglers, so we may as well kill them as well. At the end of the day, every little helps, and with this mission, we'll take whatever help we can get. When it comes to defending ourselves against the early enemy attacks, I do have a few tips that may just save your run. First off, we want to build our structures, including temples, as far away from our starting TC as we realistically can. Having to garrison our villagers to protect them from the enemy's villager fetish is a sure way to fall behind in this mission, and that's assuming the enemy doesn't just find a pocket of villagers you forgot to garrison and send them off to Hades. Secondly, build a second town centre or village near our allies' base to pump out even more villagers. The faster we can get our wood, food and favour online, the better. And since we are using excess food to build caravans, it also speeds up our gold eco as well. More caravans equals more gold. Whilst I have been talking, the enemy has been trying to build stables behind our base. This is an event that starts around the 4-minute mark and is needed to be shut down, else this can cause some unnecessary chaos if not dealt with. For some reason, the enemy cavalry are really miffed that we stole their farms outside our base, and so spend some time destroying them. It is also worth considering building a wall on top of the hill next to the gold mine, just west of our TC, as this will also aggro some of their cavalry, buying precious moments whilst we deal with any stables the enemy managed to build. Once destroyed, send the army to the TC and use the additional DPS and hit points of the town centre to thwart the first attack. I actually think this fight is worth using the bronze god power, as it gives our troops a much needed defence, and we want to try and preserve as many units as we possibly can ready for the second and arguably the most devastating attack. Now I say this not because the strength of their attack, but more because at this stage of the game we are still in the economy phase of our build. Resources are tight and our macro engine hasn't quite kicked in yet. As you can see on screen, our units of choice for this mission are going to be myth units, starting with Minotaurs due to their decent health pools, special attacks which send enemy units flying, and overall DPS. They are much stronger than any of the human units we could build at this stage of the game. And value for money, well, it's not even close. I genuinely think that trying to defend the upcoming attacks with human units is both a waste of time and resources. They just don't have the DPS or survivability that we need. Another reason we are focusing on Minotaurs instead of Hydras at this stage of the game is because most of our food is going into creating workers. We simply don't have the spare 250 food requirement at this stage of the game, and in my opinion spending our food on villages is far better in the long run. Now arguably we could buy food with our excess gold, and that is a choice for you to make. Since myth units are what we will be building for the foreseeable future, we also need favour, and so we will need to balance our villagers accordingly. That being said, I did manage to sneak one Hydra out. At around the 9-minute mark, the enemy is on our doorstep with another attack. This time they are boasting Colossus, Petrobolos, and of course their signature cavalry units. As before, we want to focus our defence around the TC, and I accidentally stumbled across a bit of a trick by building a fortress next to the town centre, which the enemy really doesn't like. So much so they seem to avoid attacking anything else and go straight for the fortress, allowing us to kill a good chunk of their army without taking much damage. Now eventually the Petrobolos did catch up and forced me to cancel the building, which I rebuilt once they were destroyed. The gate at the bottom of the hill really did make a world of difference in this engagement, as some of the enemy troops, including the Colossus, were busy destroying my walls whilst the main engagement was happening around my fortress. Suffice to say, whether through luck, skill or a combination of the two, this fight went very much in our favour. Once the fight had ended, I rebuilt my town centre and focused on building up my economy further whilst building more troops ready for the next attack. This time around, Hydra were very much on the menu, as well as some more Minotaurs. This time, however, my army was straight up stronger than theirs, and the balance of power had very much shifted in my favour. I crushed their army with relative ease, and then discovered the enemy had built a fortress on the hill above my base whilst we were fighting. Yeah, that's not allowed to stay there, chum. Over the next few minutes I focused my efforts on rebuilding my walls and repairing the damage to the town centre, whilst continuing to pump out villagers 2 at a time. My economy was finally in a strong position, and once the next fight was over, I built my own fortress in place of the one I'd recently destroyed and started accumulating food ready to age up with Hera. Once we were in the Mythic Age, the writing was on the wall for our opponent. I now had access to the final nail in their coffin, the Medusa. Coupled with the Hera's Rage upgrade and Lightning Storm, it really was only a matter of time for our enemy. I continued parrying the next few attacks whilst building up my population limit with Hydra and Medusa, and also worked on my upgrades in the background. Once my upgrades were done and Burning Pitch was researched, it was time to go on the offensive. And despite our opponent's best efforts to thwart my attacks, they really did stand no chance against our myth units and macro engine. The mission concluded once all of their military buildings had been destroyed, and victory was ours. On to mission 6, I hope this works next, where Odysseus suggests we build the Trojan horse to feign our surrender to Troy. Phase 1 of this mission is pretty straightforward. The fastest way to approach this mission is to auto-queue villagers onto the nearby trees, start the wood upgrade, and build 5 fishy boats. The fishy boats will allow us to keep pumping out villagers whilst we obtain 1000 wood. We will want to periodically build houses so that we don't end up population capped, and then use our army to surround and kill any scouts as they arrive. Once we have hit our wood quota, move everyone onto building the Trojan horse, and rally the new villagers to help. We should be close to our population cap at this point, so it's worth building one additional house. Then it's simply a case of using our army to catch and surround any more scouts the enemy sends our way. If the enemy does manage to escape our wrath, we do have a single get out of jail free card, using Zeus's lightning bolt. Using this tactic, phase 1 should be completed around the 8-minute mark, ready for phase 2. Phase 2 can be a bit tricky on Ludicrous, but the best method I found was to send 3 of the siege towers to the fort in the far right and try to deal as much damage as possible to it, whilst the other siege towers target the gate for the main objective. As a side note, you could weaken the gate and then send all 4 siege towers before destroying the gate with the rest of your troops. The goal here is to weaken the fort enough that a single meteor shower can destroy it. Sadly, I got a bit unlucky in my run, so had to try and snipe the fort using a single shot from a Petrobolos. This leaves us with most of our army and 1 meteor shower to take down the other 2 forts. The first fort is easy to destroy using just our Petrobolos, whilst our army deals with the enemy troops. Once the army's been dispatched, we want to use Odysseus and Arcantus' buff ability to take down the Manticores on the high ground, and then lure the enemy army into favourable engagements. Then use the remaining meteor shower and whatever siege units, including any Colossus we have, to target down the last fort. And GG, victory is ours. Mission 7, More Bandits, is next, and our objective here is to free the hero Chiron from said bandits by destroying the citadel guarding him. This one is quite a linear mission and relatively straightforward. We start off using Arcantos and Ajax to free the centaurs imprisoned along the road, and then free the militia and troops in the adjacent prison. From there we destroy the gate to the next area whilst building up and upgrading our Hydras and Centaurs, who are the key to victory with this mission. We also want to pick up the relic at the back of the prison, which gives us a 5% boost to all range DPS. Given the number of Centaurs we'll be producing this mission, this relic is well worth picking up. The battle beyond the gate can be quite tricky, so we want to lure the enemy into more favourable engagements, as opposed to going in balls deep into enemy territory and getting surrounded. Once this area has been secured and the watchtower destroyed, more production buildings will become available to us, including an armory, so we can grab our upgrades and focus once again on Centaurs and Hydras. For the next area, the most efficient method of clearing out this zone is to target the troops on the left hand side first. They oftentimes try to backstab our forces whilst we take down the tower, so better just deal with the threat nice and early on, and then we have free reign to take care of the tower and the troops defending it. At this point we should have a pretty sizable army left over, but it is worth picking up some Petrobolos before the final battle. The easiest and most straightforward path is the path to the north, and whilst our troops deal with the gate and the low ground tower, our Petrobolos can deal with the high ground tower. At this point our enemies will send their scarabs to engage our troops, so we want to utilise our heroes and centaurs to deal with this threat and avoid taking unnecessary damage from their poison cloud ability on death. As for the citadel itself, I found the best strategy was to snipe the walls directly ahead of us, then lure the enemy troops out of position with our centaurs. Whilst this does trigger every enemy unit to attack us, we want to snipe the Avengers and then pop the ceasefire god power, and then surround the enemy citadel with our troops. Once destroyed, the mission ends with our victory. Easy bruv. On to what is arguably the most difficult mission in the first set of 10 Greek campaign missions now, with Scenario 8, Bad News. This mission starts us off with two separated bases, with our eastern base being rich in wood, whilst our southern base is rich in gold and food. A strong economy is key to the success of this mission, and so to start off we are going to be auto-queuing villagers, relocating our wood eco to the south of our starting position for two reasons. One, so that our economy is out of the way from the early enemy attacks, and secondly so we can use our town centre to provide extra DPS without damaging our economy. We want to leave our starting villagers on temple duty until we hit exactly 15 favour, so we can build our first of many Minotaurs. Then send those villagers to build a village by the woods to the north of our base, once again to keep our economy away from the front lines and to help us power up our economy. During this time we also want to use our starting troops and heroes to target down the enemy gates right outside of our bases. There is no downside for doing this, and opens up the rest of the map for us to use down the line. Next up we want to use Chiron and his starting forces to lure the enemy forces just outside of our base away from the tower, and then to snipe the barracks and archery range to prevent additional reinforcements for the enemy attacks. Coupled with the Minotaur we built earlier, this should be a relatively free kill. Meanwhile Ajax and his troops want to move back to our sentry tower, ready to await the first enemy attack, which is due at the 3-minute mark. At this point we should have a fairly strong wood eco, so next up we need to use that wood to kickstart our food economy through farms. It is around this time that our southern base needs to start focusing on gold so we can think about aging up. At around the 4-minute 40 mark our initial foraging area should almost be drying up, so we need to relocate our berry boys to the back of our base to start hunting and shepherding instead. This is also about the time that the enemy attacks our eastern base. We want to lure the enemies to our town centre and then use the sentry towers to support our defence. This is where we start to see the benefits of having our economy further afield. The enemy focuses their efforts on our troops rather than their villager-induced rage they normally have. With the Minotaur and extra defences, this should be an easy fight to win. Some of you eagle-eyed viewers may have spotted that I have a Pegasus parked in a gold-rich area of the map next to a very powerful relic. And this is part of a cheeky strat I have planned out for this mission, utilising Apollo's underworld gate. This is ordinarily an extreme late game location, but with this strat it is actually a big part of our early to mid game build order. At around the 5:30 mark we want to start thinking about Age 3, so an armory and a marketplace is our next focus, alongside more farms for the food gods. We also want to start powering up our production, so stables and temples are next on the agenda for both bases. If you are following a similar build order, around the 8-minute mark is where we need to start building our houses in order to avoid being pop capped, and ready to age up with Apollo specifically for the Underworld Gate. However, at this point you can really go your own way with this mission, and I can 100% see a reason to go for Dionysus instead for the Hydras. In many respects I do think Hydras are the better option here, as Medusa Hydra are the goated unit composition. However, since in every previous run I have done this mission with Dionysus, I wanted to mix things up a bit. I decided to showcase my cheeky Apollo strat instead. Whilst we are researching Age 3, with whichever god we choose, we want to start auto-queuing our economy and armory upgrades. Around the 9-minute mark we'll signal the next attack from the enemy, this time from the southern base. At this point, some of you may have noticed that the enemy attacks are starting to follow a pattern, with each attack alternating between bases spaced around the 3-minute mark in game between attacks, give or take. This means the next attack we need to prepare for is on our eastern base. A small oversight on my part with this attack meant that my villagers mining for gold in the south triggered the enemy troops, and here we see the true colours of our enemy. Like a bull in a red flag, the enemy troops chose to ignore my army and instead go after defenceless workers. This is a perfect example of why it is good practice to build your economy away from the front lines. By the 10-minute mark we should have aged up and ready to utilise our cheeky Apollo strat. By using the vision of the Pegasus we can create an underworld gate between the back of our southern base and the gold mines in the hills above. If we are lucky, this should coincide with us mining out the gold at the back of our base, making for an easy worker transfer. Pushing on to the 11-minute mark, we want to ensure our upgrades are getting pushed out, so if we need to we can utilise our market to redistribute our resources to get all of our upgrades started. And at this point in the game I have around 22 workers on food, wood and gold, with 15 on favour generation. Next up we want to focus on hitting Age 4, so we're still only building a few troops here and there to ensure our survival and nothing more, whilst continuing to power through our upgrades as we push towards 1200 food and gold. At the 11-minute mark the next enemy attack should be at our door, but only a handful of myth units and heroes should be required to deflect this enemy attack, whilst taking advantage of our sentry towers and TC for defence. The hero Hippolyta will be a major threat to our myth units, so we may need to be a bit more careful with how we engage this fight. Once the fight is concluded we need to start getting prepared for more intense attacks from the enemy. This was pretty much the last of the minor attacks, since we are now officially heading into the mid game of this mission, so extra production is required in order for us to both survive and start putting on our own pressure. Between the 12 and 13-minute mark should be when we are looking to age up again, and whilst I personally think Hera is the best choice here, both options are viable. For me, Hera gives us more DPS than Hephaestus, between Hera's Rage, 3 Myrmidons, Lightning Storm, and of course my favourite unit, the Medusa, which is honestly the single best unit for this mission, in my humble opinion, myth unit or otherwise. I should probably mention that up to this point, the Hippeus, Minotaurs and Manticores are the units we want to be building in order to survive, and only as many as we need to, since up to this point we have been entirely defensive whilst we power up our economy. Whilst we continue to boom into the 15-minute mark, we should now have enough troops that we can start being more present on the map, starting with the fortress above our southern base. With the fort now built and a handful of Petrobolos, we can now dispatch this fortress with relative ease, enabling future attacks on the forward base below. As we head into the 17-minute mark of this mission, our economy is officially booming, and Age 4 has arrived. All of our upgrades have been auto-queued, and we are ready to start powering up our Medusa and turn our defense into offense. At this point, our economy has shifted towards food, wood and favour, since from here on out, our Minotaurs and Medusa will be our core unit composition, with some Hippeas to support. The next few minutes will keep us on the defensive as the enemy launches ever more dangerous attacks against us as we build up our Medusa count towards a critical mass, typically around 7. At this point in the game, gold is starting to become an issue, so we need to start expanding our territory in order to secure more gold. Over the next few minutes, our aim will be to destroy the enemy forward bases, whilst continuing to thwart enemy attacks. Our primary targets will be production buildings, including the fortress and temple that connects our bases through the middle of the map, thus allowing us to either connect our armies into a death ball or continue to push both lanes. Whilst both options are viable, there is much less risk involved with keeping our armies split. Losing either base would be far too damaging to our economy, since we have gone for a 60-40 split between bases. By the 20-minute mark, most if not all of our upgrades should now be completed. With Manticores and Medusa on our side, powerful myth units like Hydra and Colossus should be far less threatening, as we continue to start to push into the enemy bases. As we start pushing into enemy territory, there is one last Hail Mary we need to prepare for. Once we have triggered the Lightning Storm God power from the enemy by pushing into their main TC on the northern base, the enemy will send 2 rocks loaded with troops, Colossus and Cyclops. We need to ensure those rocks are killed before they land, or at the very least be prepared to deal with them, as they can cause utter havoc if we are caught off guard. It typically takes them around 1 minute to reach our base once the Lightning Storm has been triggered. Once this threat has been eliminated, it should be plain sailing to the end of the mission. My final push was almost pure Medusa with hero support and a handful of troops, and suffice to say the enemy didn't stand a chance, once again leading me to conclude that Medusa are in fact the real MVPs of this mission, and the goatiest of goats. Hydras? Don't need them, mate. Whilst it is probably a good idea to combine your forces at this point in the game, I decided to push both lanes at the same time, and finally decided to use my Lightning Storm God power, which I had been holding on to until now. With our Medusa barely getting scratched as they turn the enemy hordes to stone and burn their buildings to the ground, the writing was very much on the wall, and victory was in our grasp. No more Hail Mary rocks, their production shattered, and their armies scattered or fallen. Our relentless pressure and unit production resulted in the destruction of their fortresses, and victory was at last ours. Mission 9 Revelation is next, and honestly this is probably the easiest and shortest mission in the Greek campaign. In this scenario we travel through the tunnels of Erebus, the realm of Hades, and since we are mostly against myth units and we have 3 of the best heroes in the game, there really is not a lot of challenge to be had in this one. In short, we kill myth units, destroy boulders to block off enemy reinforcements, pick up some stray Medusa, kill a bunch of enemies who appear to be stuck and unable to move into position, and then take out the guards defending the giant ram. And a few minutes later we destroy the giant ram itself, and this mission is done. All inside of 7 minutes. Cheers for the free win, I guess. On to the final mission of this Greek campaign now with Scenario 10, Strangers. This is very much a continuation of the previous mission, both in terms of the linear aspect of this mission, and also in many respects the level of difficulty as well. Essentially we have our heroes doing 95% of the work this mission, a handful of troops we mostly keep away from the fighting until we actually need them, and a bunch of shades to scout and snipe high value targets such as Medusa and Colossus. The rest of this mission honestly comes down to taking favourable engagements through luring small groups of enemies, kiting, and making full use of our goatiest of heroes. If I am being honest, there are only a handful of fights which pose any real threat to our heroes, which includes the mummies at the end of the first phase, and surprisingly the Wadjets that ambush us at the end of the second phase. Interestingly, the challenge from both of these mobs is actually the poison damage they apply, which adds a surprising amount of dot damage. Beyond those two fights, there really is very little challenge to be had from this mission, and saving your shades for the Colossus at the end of the mission is optional at best, since our heroes really don't have any issues with dealing with them, not to mention the cheeky lightning storm which we get for good measure. So there we have it folks, the Donny Boy guide for the Fall of the Trident post-patch Greek campaign, missions 1 to 10. I appreciate this is more of an experimental and different style of video to normal, so I would be very much interested to hear any feedback you might have in the comments section below. Naturally, if you enjoyed this video, please do give it a thumbs up, and if this video does well, then I will of course cover the Egyptian, Norse and Atlantean campaigns as well in a similar format. For those of you who prefer my more traditional style of video, then I will be uploading a no commentary long play version of these 10 missions, and once again I would like to thank you for your time, and as always, I shall see you in the next video.